What eye color and hair did the Vikings have? What haplogroups were prevalent among them? And what was their overall genetic makeup? While we know that Vikings left a significant genetic impact on many regions they raided and settled, like parts of Britain and Ireland, what influence did foreign genetics exert on Scandinavia itself during the Viking Age? I'll cover these questions and much more in this video. To start, the Viking Age spanned approximately from the 8th to the 11th centuries AD. While we often refer to the Vikings as a unified group, the term Vikings actually describes more the act of raiding by sea than a fully cohesive empire. Many individuals, primarily men, embarked from what we now call Scandinavia, specifically modern-day Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, in search of fortune, land, women, and other motivations that may have driven them. Collectively, these individuals became known as the Vikings. An intriguing theory suggests that the Viking phenomenon may have stemmed from an imbalance in the operational sex ratio in Scandinavia. This term refers to the ratio of males to females in a society who are available for mating at any given time. Such an imbalance could have resulted in a surplus of unmarried men who may have been motivated to engage in raiding as a way to gain wealth, status, and potential mates. Regardless of the exact reasons, these Vikings ventured forth to raid and explore vast areas of Western Eurasia, including Greenland and North America. In many cases, they settled in these foreign lands, establishing the Danelaw period in what we now know as England, for instance. Before we delve into the eye color of the Vikings, let's first consider whether the genetic makeup of Scandinavia itself changed during the Viking Age. A fascinating study published in Nature in 2020 examined the population genomics of the Viking world, revealing that a substantial amount of foreign ancestry entered Scandinavia during this period. More specifically, this study highlighted that ancestry from Britain and Ireland was integrated into Western Scandinavia during the Viking Age, while Finnish and Baltic ancestry made its way into modern Sweden. Additionally, there was a notable amount of Southern European ancestry entering Denmark and southwestern Sweden, particularly traced back to Italy. This influx of genetic material is intriguing, given that Southern Europe is obviously much further from Scandinavia than regions like Britain, Ireland, and the Baltic states. But what prompted these genetic shifts in Scandinavia? Some explanations likely relate to the Vikings bringing back slaves and forming relationships with foreign women, many of whom may have started as slaves. One estimate suggests that slaves could have made up as much as 10% of the Viking-era population in Scandinavia. Moreover, a separate study published in Cell in 2023 presented tentative evidence indicating that gene flow into Scandinavia from Eastern Baltic ancestry, and to a lesser extent, British-Irish ancestry, was biased towards females. This hypothesis aligns with the notion that the predominantly male Vikings would have returned home with foreign women. In general, the Nature study concluded that levels of non-Scandinavian ancestry in Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish Vikings align with known trading routes. This finding makes logical sense, as the genetic patterns observed during the Viking Age appear to correlate closely with the trade routes of the time. Now, let's turn our attention to eye color. What were the primary eye colors among the Vikings? Presently, many people in Scandinavia exhibit lighter eye colors, such as blue, green, and gray. One estimate suggests that around 78% of Sweden's population has blue eyes today. Did the Vikings share this trait? Before exploring this question in detail, it's worth noting that the Nature study cautioned against assuming a singular Viking phenotype. Given the fluidity and diversity of the Viking population compared to a unified empire, no definitive Viking appearance existed. With that caveat, it seems there was some variation in eye color during the Viking Age. For example, one Viking sample from Skara in Sweden had alleles associated with brown eyes and darker hair, while another sample from Greenland likely had blue eyes and lighter hair. Overall, when researchers analyzed the genetic markers linked to eye and hair pigmentation, they found that the frequencies are quite similar to those of present-day Scandinavians. This suggests that the Vikings would have had blue, gray, and green eyes in relatively similar proportions to people in modern Scandinavia. Consequently, lighter eyes were likely common among the Vikings compared to global averages, though some variation was still present. To elaborate on this further, the supplementary information of the nature study provides additional details. The authors write that the SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, with the strongest association with lighter hair and eye pigmentation, such as those found in the HERC2, OCA2, and TYR genes, were elevated in the Viking population. Furthermore, the distribution of allele frequencies closely resembles that of present-day Northern European populations, as represented by the CEU 1000 Genomes Project, and the modern Danish population, DK. This suggests that the genetic profile of pigmentation SNPs we observe in contemporary Northern Europeans had largely formed by the onset of the Viking period. However, this picture may not fully apply to Denmark. When the study compared present-day Scandinavian populations for various traits, they found significant differences between Viking Age samples and current Danish populations for 3 specific traits: black hair color, standing height, and schizophrenia. The Viking Age samples exhibited higher rates for all 3 traits compared to modern Danes, although the heightened rates for standing height and schizophrenia did not hold when accounting for multiple tests. Black hair did show a significant difference. This implies that Vikings in Denmark likely had darker hair on average than modern Danes, which raises interesting questions. Could this change be attributed to the influx of Southern European ancestry, or is there another explanation? We would really like to know what you think in the comments below. Another captivating aspect to consider is how Viking eye color may have influenced the spread of lighter eyes to other regions around the globe, including the Middle East. This eye color appears at relatively higher levels in the Middle East than in many other areas, which is somewhat unexpected given how sensitive gray eyes typically are to light due to their low melanin content. Another person suggested that one explanation for the gray, blue, and green eyes in the Middle East I heard recently on a podcast was that Vikings would capture women from Northern Europe to be traded in the Middle East for use in harems, etc. While the accuracy of this theory remains uncertain, it's a fascinating possibility. In researching the Viking slave trade, it becomes clear that they maintained a considerable slave trade network, often capturing people from places like Britain and Ireland. If these individuals weren't brought back to Scandinavia, they were frequently sold in markets across Eurasia, including in the Middle East and Central Asia. One prominent trading partner for the Vikings was the Abbasid Caliphate, which had its capital in Baghdad, modern-day Iraq. The Vikings supplied the Muslim world with European slaves in exchange for Arab silver. While there are likely various factors influencing the higher prevalence of gray eyes in the Middle East compared to other regions, the impact of Viking slave trading on genetic makeup remains a topic of debate. Nevertheless, it presents an interesting angle to consider, especially in understanding why we see gray eyes in areas like the Middle East and Central Asia. Before we continue with the genetic history of the Vikings and their haplogroups, the nature study found that modern Scandinavian populations are still relatively structured based on ancient Viking population groups. For instance, the component identified as Norwegian-like is present at 45 to 65% in present-day Norway. Meanwhile, the ancient Swedish-like ancestry accounts for 15 to 30% in Sweden, and Danish-like ancestry is prevalent across the entire region. This last point highlights another finding of the study. During the Viking Age, the primary population movement was northward, meaning that Danish Vikings migrated into what is now Norway and Sweden. Generally, the study found that the Vikings formed into 3 main genetic clusters that correspond closely to modern Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. Regarding Viking haplogroups, one of the most common Y-DNA haplogroups among them was I1, also known as IM253. This haplogroup remains prevalent among Scandinavian men and those of Scandinavian descent today, and it can be found throughout Northern Europe. It is particularly common in parts of Sweden and Finland, where its presence exceeds 50%. This haplogroup is often associated with the migration of Germanic peoples in general, Other notable paternal haplogroups identified among Scandinavian men from the Viking Age include R1b and R1a, particularly the R1az284 subclade. On the maternal side, a 2015 study examined the mitochondrial DNA variation in the Viking Age population of Norway by analyzing the DNA of 80 ancient individuals. The researchers identified that the ancient Norwegians had genetic similarities to previously examined ancient Icelanders and contemporary populations from the Shetland and Orkney Islands, as well as Norwegians, Swedes, Scots, English, Germans, and French. Notably, the Viking Age population exhibited higher frequencies of haplogroups K star, U star, V star, and I star compared to their modern counterparts, but they had lower proportions of haplogroups T star and H star. 3 individuals displayed haplotypes that are rare in contemporary Norway today: U5b1b1, a star, and an uncommon variant of H star. These findings indicate that Norse women played a crucial role in the Vikings' overseas expansion and settlement, with women from the Orkneys and Western Isles contributing significantly to the colonization of Iceland.